Uh, Here is a picture of me. That's what I look like, in case you don't know. I've been at Holiday Extras for 6 years now. So for the first 4 years, I was an engineer. And then over the past 2, I've kind of transitioned into my current role of the dev lead. I'm going to be talking about industrial placement students today because I've been working with them for the past 3 years. And I want to share some of the kind of knowledge that I've gained working with them and some of the insights that I have into how it works. So, there are 3 questions that I want to answer in this talk. The first, how have IPs influenced my career? Going to talk a little bit about myself. I can do that for ages, so it's a good job it's a time talk. How can they help you? So everyone wants to get something out of this talk, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can better utilize the IPs that you might have in your team and how what you can get out of them. And then also about how you can help them. Really, that's kind of my main point here. So, first of all though, I want to go back to the basics of what are IPs. Because I've talked a little bit about, I've mentioned IPs, industrial placement students, all those kind of things. And I want to kind of define what that is. So IPs are industrial placement students. They're university students that come to Holiday Extras as a part of their course. As students, they are still paying for the privilege of doing that. They do still pay tuition fees, and they are still assessed. So if you ever hear an IP talking about a placement diary or assessment, anything like that, that's generally what they're talking about. Where it fits into their university career, so a typical university career goes from your first year, second year, final year, and then you graduate with a piece of paper feeling happy and a little bit poor. The placement year fits in between that second and third year, and it's an opportunity for them to get that kind of invaluable work experience. We've typically seen that people that do a placement year do better in their final year, and it sets them up for success earlier in their careers as well. So, and it's that setting up for success that I want to really focus on today. The process of hiring IPs is actually quite a lengthy process. It takes approximately 20 months for each cohort of IPs that we have through. Starts in October when we talk to the universities and we get a chance to go in there and deliver a presentation to them. So that presentation we give in December. Then in January we do open up the applications. February we do assessment days. March we're starting to assign tech mentors. July they join us. Through to October and May we do reviews with the university, and then in the July following they go back to university. So it is a long process, but one that we're kind of really invested in at Holiday Extras, and each year that we go through it we iterate on it to make sure that our IPs are supported in the best way possible throughout their year. So going back to those 3 questions, the first question then, how have IPs influenced my career? Actually, it goes back to my very first days at Holiday Extras, like my very first day. So when I joined the Germany team, and there were 2 other engineers in there at the time, one of whom was Tom Price, who was an IP at the time. And Tom was my buddy basically for my onboarding, and he helped me set up my laptop, helped me install all the systems and get running on things. So really the basis of my knowledge and the basis of everything that I've done at Holiday Extras was as a result of Tom Price. So everything that follows is his fault. A couple of years into my career here at Holiday Extras, as I was growing as an engineer here, I was looking for ways to kind of give back to the community and give back to other engineers at Holiday Extras. And the opportunity came up to be a tech mentor for the IPs. For those of you that don't know, a tech mentor basically is a longer term buddy who helps support them with any technical issues that they might have. So I decided to kind of pay it forward a little bit from what Tom had given me and help those new IPs that were coming in with what they were going through. But actually, in helping them, I learned a lot about myself. So working with people that were still at university, working with those really junior engineers, it gave me perspective on where I was in my career. So I had left university like 5 years before, something like that. And it gave me perspective on what I'd learned in that time, how I'd grown as an engineer. It was a little bit like looking back in time, but not too much. Introduced me to this concept that I coined as expert syndrome. So what I mean by expert syndrome is we forget how difficult it is to learn things. When you become proficient in something such that it's completely natural to you, you forget the pain and the process that you went through in order to learn that. And we see it kind of typified when people say like, oh, it's only a 2-point ticket, why is it taking a week? Because we've forgotten that process. We've forgotten how difficult it was to learn those things and how difficult it was to do those things. And it's only actually with the benefit of hindsight that we can say that was easy. And it really introduced my focus to developer experience. And as an engineer, this kind of changed how I was looking at things and how I was going about the work that I was doing. I turned the question kind of on myself. How can I set this person up for success? How can I make their experience better? How can I make it so that everyone around me is having a better experience? Following on from being a tech lead, the natural progression for me was to become an IP lead. So I actually took over the management of the IPs completely. And for me, this is where kind of my coaching and mentoring skills started to develop. So not only did I have to kind of learn the difference between these two, but I also had to learn like which one was appropriate at a different time. And working with the IPs, I faced problems that I hadn't foreseen. Working with IPs can be frustrating. There are problems that you don't kind of expect to happen, but that's the same with any people, I suppose. And really working with those IPs as the IP lead gave me the basis and the foundation for what I would then go on to do as a developer lead. It gave me perspective on other engineers. So there's a term, Sonder, which is defined as the realization that every random passerby is living a life as intricate and as vivid and complex as your own. And I'll freely admit that I hadn't really taken this into account before now. You know, we all kind of live inside our own heads and inside our own bubbles, and actually talking to these people, talking to these IPs, gave me that perspective that everybody is different and everybody's on their own different path. So when I started working with people and I started trying to coach them and trying to mentor them, I was coaching and I was mentoring them to be more like me. But actually what I found was that everybody was on their own different path, and I had to understand that path and lead them down that one. And finally, and this is kind of the key point for me, which is what kind of made me eventually make the complete move to go into the dev lead role, which was seeing success in other people's progression. So developing those skills and working with those IPs, I started to kind of feel fulfilled in that, you know, working with somebody who maybe had confidence issues and seeing them through their career, through their year, kind of gradually become more and more confident. Working with somebody who was maybe it is their technical skill and then developing their technical skill, but seeing their goals and working with them from the very beginning all the way through their year with us and helping them at the end, that kind of gave me the fulfillment and gave me like an enormous sense of pride, which is kind of what led me to be where I am. So in answer to the question, how have IPs influenced my career, really they've been instrumental in it at Holiday Extras from the very outset, from the very first days through to the role that I'm in now. Because of IPs, I've taken those opportunities and my progression, my development, I kind of took those opportunities and developed as I wanted. So the next question then, how can they help you? So Holiday Extras has IPs. It's a given. If you ask why we do it, the official line is somewhere around kind of recruitment and investment in the next generation of engineers. That's fine from a business point, but that's kind of what IPs are and them as a metric. But I think the real value in IPs is in who they are and as individuals. So IPs are passionate. They're really early on in their craft and in their chosen career. They're bright-eyed and eager, and they typically want to prove themselves. They want to push themselves and they want to challenge themselves and try new things. And any of the IPs or ex-IPs kind of shake if this isn't true. They want to try new things and they want to develop. If you linked it back to our values, IPs are courageous. So you can use that to your advantage, and you can set them on you can use that passion, set them on a task, and they will fulfill it to the best of their ability. IPs have a different perspective. So they aren't just new to this business, but they're new to the industry, they're new to their career. They aren't shackled by things like, this didn't work before, so we can't do it again. And they're not bound by boxes. They don't have to think outside the box because they haven't yet been put in a box. So yes, some of the things that they might suggest might be ludicrous or seem impossible, but then you have to ask yourself, are they really? It's those kind of ideas, that fresh thinking, that leads us to push forwards. It forces us to question, what can we do and what are we willing to do? And using that passion and that perspective can lead them to try new things that we wouldn't even think about before. For instance, micro UIs. So use that passion and use that perspective to be better than we might otherwise be. IPs will challenge you, and sometimes they'll challenge you in ways that you would prefer that they didn't. But thinking back to my own progression, these were the times when I developed the most. These were the times when I had to really question myself and improve what I was doing. So IPs make you question yourself, what you're doing. They'll ask you why. And when you give them an answer, they'll ask you why. And it's that in asking why, that forces you to come up with an answer. It forces you to come up with a better answer, which ultimately leads to you coming up with better solutions. And IPs form a key part of our team. So I got a few stats from Steph. We've been doing this since 2010, and from the stats that we could find, we've had 36 IPs over the years, and we've hired back 52% of those. So again, that's kind of going back to IPs as a metric, but again, it's about the value that they've contributed outside of that. So things like micro UIs, the Countdown app, the adoption of GraphQL and Redux work, these are all initiatives that were led by IPs or ex-IPs. So in answer to the question, how can IPs help you? Well, IPs are passionate with a different perspective, and they'll challenge you in ways that you don't expect and deliver amazing things. So the next question then, how can you help them? Now that's all well and good, but as I mentioned at the start, IPs are still students. And when I asked the students who had come back to us, the ex-IPs, why they did their placement year, it was around increasing their work experience, making their CV look good, and about getting out of the textbook university culture and into the real world. When I asked the university why they promoted placements, it was again about that transition from student to professional. It was about helping them decide what they wanted to do, what they valued, what motivated them. Sian from the university, she gave me the quote of, placement years aren't about what IPs learn, it's about what they learn about themselves. So the placement year gives them greater awareness and takes them from that student mentality into a job-ready state. So how can you help them fulfill that? So my first point here, give them space to learn. IPs don't know everything. They're in their second year of university. So don't expect everything from them. You have to give them space to learn and give them space to grow. We can't put pressure on them, and we shouldn't be putting pressure on them. And we shouldn't be trying to test them. I suppose the point is, would you rather have somebody do a good job slowly or a bad job quickly? That was right. And each time an IP changes pods or changes projects, changes context, they're going to take a step back. They're going to take a little bit of a knock in confidence, but each time they do that, they will come forward and be better than they were before. So we should give them that space in order to learn things. Give them, time around those tickets in order to understand the context of what they're working in. One of the key quotes that's passed down year to year from each cohort is that within 3 months, people will be coming to you for help. That's only true if we give them the space to learn. So give them direction. So coming into a new industry, some of whom are actually starting work for the very first time, they don't know what they need to learn. They won't have figured out what the unknowns are to them yet. We need to give them direction and give them a path, show them a path. Use that unbridled enthusiasm that I was talking about before and give it a purpose, give it a cause. Then afterwards, let them decide if it's working or not. Sometimes you might have to kind of give them a bit of a kick or a bit of a nudge in order for them to see. And that kind of leads me on to my next point of give them actionable feedback. So when starting out in a new role or a new company, let alone a new industry and career, it's important to receive good quality feedback in order to help you progress. So look for ways that they can develop. What things are they doing really well? How are they doing awesome things? What things are they maybe doing not so well? And what things should they outright stop? Remember, with them being some of them being in their first job, they won't have necessarily developed that workplace etiquette yet. That comes back to that expert syndrome that we all kind of forget that is a learned skill. So give them feedback on it. Let them know what they're doing well. Let them know what they're not doing well. Don't assume that things will just get better and that it'll fix itself with time. And also don't assume that they know the obvious. And if kind of all that fails, don't write things like keep doing what you're doing. Give them signposts. Show them a path and help them be better. So thinking of all the above, it's kind of important to have clear expectations with them, and clear expectations with your team. And these expectations go both ways in terms of defining your relationship. So in the past I've seen examples where this hasn't been the case, and where people's expectations have been misaligned, and that's caused friction in teams, and it's caused problems of perception of performance within teams. A lot of P's there. So take the time when starting out to get to know each other. Take the time to figure out what each other likes and dislikes. What are your peeves? What are your ticks? One thing that I've found that really helps to do this is to have an expectation setting session. So I sit down with new starters in my team and we discuss, what do they want to achieve? What do I want them to achieve? How are you going to support each other in doing that? And what are you each going to be accountable for? So doing this will set you up for a more successful relationship. Write good documentation. It's one of the things that I'm kind of really looking into at the moment. But each year we have IPs that get the feedback of, you need to be asking more questions. And I'd like to challenge that right now. Because I actually think we should be asking more vital questions. The basic questions about how to set things up, how to install things, how a project is laid out, those kind of things should already be covered in our documentation and shouldn't be things that people have to ask. So document your team's processes and onboarding, your architecture, your code, so that, and make all of that documentation easily accessible. I heard earlier from one of the talks about, from the email talk about Google Site. Use those Google Sites, but make them accessible, make them part of a centralized place, and make it so that anybody joining your team is aware of that knowledge and anybody around your team can access it. That way, any questions that the new starter has will be smarter, their impact on your team will be lessened, and their time to ramping up will be quicker. And this is my kind of final point here on how to help them. And what I mean by this is allow them to be individual and to experiment and to try new things. Help them to be courageous instead of cushioning them and protecting them from difficulties. Anybody who knows me likes a good analogy, and I managed to fit one into this talk, and here it is. For me, this reminds me of paddleboarding. So every time I go out paddleboarding, when I get on my board and I stand up, I'm a little bit shaky and I'm a little bit wobbly, and it's because I'm not focusing on enjoying the experience, I'm focusing on the cold water beneath me. And I don't want to fall in. And that fear of falling in eventually means that I do. So then I climb back out, I stand back on the board, and I stand up, and everything goes a lot smoother from then on, and I can focus on enjoying the experience. Our fear of doing something puts barriers in the way. It limits our performance. So if we can tackle that fear head on, if we can do things that tackle that fear, that approach it head on, then we can get over it. Whether that's jumping into the water straight off, or whether it's shipping code to the staging environment and it breaking. We have, at Holiday Extras, a safe environment. Our IPs are treated like engineers from the very first day that they get here. We've seen IPs that have shipped code on their second day, and we've seen IPs that have taken 3 months to do that independently. And I have faith in both of these approaches because we have a safe environment. We have staging environments and PRs. We have tests and testers. We have rollback procedures. We have all of these things in place so that if something goes wrong, we can very quickly fix it. we are a safe environment, so actually maybe each of us here could start experimenting with that a little bit more. So the question that I asked for this section was, how can you help them? But actually, in retrospect, the question should have been, how can we help each other? Because this talk is about IPs, but this applies to everybody. Those things that I've just gone through about how to help IPs apply to whether you're a junior engineer joining a pod, or you're a senior engineer that's been here for years and is just moving around. We all encounter situations that are new to us and things that we don't expect. So those are the 3 questions that I wanted to answer in this keynote, and hopefully everyone's taken a little bit of something away from these. But the main point that I want everybody to consider is setting up for success. For me, this is kind of one of the core values that I now hold, and one of the core things that I try to do in my daily life. I believe it's important for us all to be setting each other up for success. It should be our primary goal as individuals, that as a collective we set each other up for success, and therefore set the business up for success. And whether that's changing the way that you write code, writing better documentation, having clear roadmaps, or setting good objectives for each other, and especially in giving good quality, timely feedback. We have a duty to each other to ensure our collective success and be supporting each other along that journey. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah?
You were talking about teaching someone and realizing that teaching them as they would teach yourself, and then after that realization, tailoring what you were teaching to fit their experience. I was wondering if you have a specific example of how that went down.
So the question was about me coaching people and mentoring people to be that carbon copy of myself, and instead helping them to be follow their own path, and whether I had an example. I don't off the top of my head. I have to be kind of careful of not divulging anything. I don't have a specific example, but I think that kind of point there around, it's very easy for us to see our path and what we've done and how we've progressed, and see that as the way that you should go forward. There's a very linear path of, you're an engineer, you're a senior engineer, and you just kind of grow it as a trade, and you just become a more experienced engineer. But other people take different paths on that thing. So myself, for example, I took a completely different path to that. Had I have just been coached and mentored along the traditional expected path of an engineer, I wouldn't have got to where I am now. Anyone else have any questions? No.
I just want to basically, I concur with everything you said, but I think perspective is a key word. It's very important. Because you can get maybe something I didn't think about more or less. Someone wants to do better.
So to summarize for the
You are us.
and everything else was true, but perspective, I think was your key takeaway for this.
Perspective is a key word.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have one. My question is, you said about everyone should treat like an IP, someone that's been here, say, 5, 6 years, and we always think about the things that, oh, we can't do that. Say to someone that would come to you and say that, how would you get them out of that thinking, or how would you try to get them to see something that like that of an IP, like fresh face, brand new? What would you do?
Yeah, so Alice's question there was, one of the points I made was that people have get stuck in the mentality of, we tried that before, it won't work, and how would I help coach or mentor somebody out of that? My response to that, if I was just going to kind of tell them, is that we are in an ever-changing business. This business changes all the time. The industry that we're in changes all the time. The people around us change all the time. We hire new people in. People move around pods. And people leave us. Everything is constantly changing. So we can't rely just on previous history. We should be trying these things, and what harm does trying again do? Anybody else?
If you're in a position where you feel like you can't find as fast as what you'd like, and your peers around you can't find as fast, how do you push that up to upper management in order to try and get this fighting culture from the top level down?
Okay. Interesting question. So the question was, if you feel like you can't fail fast enough, how do you push that culture upwards to management? You're in a lucky place if you can't fail fast enough. All the time. How do I answer this? I suppose it's about emphasizing that safe environment that you've got. So you're from Parkett, right? And, yeah. So it's about emphasizing those things that you have in place that allow you to do to try. Like with the email talk that happened earlier about where they were saying that they split test things. And they can split test something, find out very quickly whether it's working or not, and then roll it back. You can do the same thing with code. And it's about emphasizing that safe environment that you have and those safety measures that you have in place. So within the web team, we run split tests, but we can be running more split tests. We can be trying smaller things and more dangerous things. But ultimately things that will push us forward, and it's about kind of that safe environment and the benefits that you're going to get from trying those different things. Yeah, Damon?
Yeah, go on. So, with your past experience of being an engineer, working in teams where you would be mentored through people as well, and then being on the other side of that, where you're a mentor, where you're also a mentor and a coach, I think the most difficult part is knowing what the difference is, and like you said, when you need to mentor and when you need to coach.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that kind of applies to us throughout the rest of the team as well, especially as engineers, because we don't always want to just mentor someone. We might actually need to decide, okay, it's probably better if I coach them now, and that's regardless of whether they've been here for a few years or if they're an IP or if they're junior. So, for example, if I change pods, I might not always just want to be told what the solution is, but I might want to be given tips to find it out myself. And so, because you've been on both sides, do you have any tips for the wider web team to be mindful of it and kind of educate us on what the difference is and then to choose one or the other? Horrible question, but you're like the best person to answer it.
Like testing my knowledge of mentoring and coaching here, and I said that I'm clear on the end. Chloe. Coaching is telling somebody, and mentoring is helping them to see, right? No. Shit.
Should we go
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Other way around. Okay. So the question was, as a please repeat the question. The question was, as a now a manager and somebody who has been an engineer, what tips do I have in coaching and mentoring, and when to do each? Crap at answering these questions. Yeah, maybe I'll do another talk on that. I'm trying to think of my own experiences with this. I think it depends on the person. It's very much who you're talking to that as to which one you would pick. Sometimes you try to coach somebody to something and they won't have it, basically. And also it depends on what kind of conversation that you're having with them. So if you were trying to give somebody some performance feedback that was kind of vital to what they were doing, you might just go straight to mentoring if it was, if you want to say, stop doing this thing. You're not going to try and coach somebody round to how might you do that better? How might you not do that? So I suppose it depends on what you're trying to achieve and who you're working with and the relationship that you have with that person. I'd love to give you a more definitive answer, but I completely screwed up the start of it, so the end wasn't much better. Sorry about that. Yeah.
I kind of have some thoughts on the question. My take would be I think coaching and mentoring kind of have the same outcome in my the idea is to get someone to a particular point. And I think coaching can also have the negative effect that if you're trying to get someone to find the answer themselves and they can't get there, that can be quite demoralising. And I think mentoring helps that person get to the point. Like if you're coaching someone to find an answer themselves and they're taking ages and I do it all the time, I get annoyed that I can't get there. I find that quite demoralising on myself, that I'm not able to get to a point that I'm trying to get to. Whereas I think mentoring, if you could read the body language on that and see where someone's struggling, mentoring helps get through that difficult part, and then you can switch back and forth between the two. That's where I see picking which one is way around the body language, how that person is reciprocating the each.
Yeah. I suppose that's what I was trying to say. What he said.
I thought I'd just mention sort of on what Tom mentioned. I think you're in a unique perspective that you can see with the coaching side of it. Coaching is about helping someone to answer the problem for themselves, right? That's coaching. Mentoring, you're in a unique perspective. That's about imparting knowledge that you've got about a subject matter on them. Now you're in a unique perspective to be able to do that as being an engineer before. So when it's an engineering problem, whereas other people can just coach because they can say, I don't really know the answer to that, but I can help find someone that can, or should you ask the right question, you can actually tell, have you thought about it doing it this way, and you've got that unique perspective. I think that's a great position, especially for IPs, so in your position, that's a really great position to be in, to actually give them that mentoring side, as opposed to just to do both, you can do either, which is good.
Thank you. Summarise for remotes. Andy said I'm awesome. Anyone else? No.